Okay, people, it's another fact-packed update of transport in the time of COVID, whipping through quickly. Lots of stuff has happened this week. So do send requests for slides and information to me at that address. And my theme is nearly a year has gone by since we started doing this. We're going to have an anniversary edition shortly, and I just want you to think about what has happened and what has not happened over the last year. Okay, this is the news of the week. Big news. Cycling UK takes council to court for irrational and unlawful removal of the pop-up cycle lanes by West Sussex County Council. And they applied for a judicial review on Wednesday, 24th of February. So there's your quote from Duncan Dollymore, and it's good to see we are Cycling UK taking action there on our behalf. Good reason to be a member. And we'll keep you posted on that. Nice editorial in the BMJ by Rachel Aldred and her colleague on low traffic neighbourhoods and population health. So that's actually made it as a BMJ editorial, which is good. Major air quality report clearing the air pollution in London by the London Assembly. Really, you just have to read it. And it's obviously about London, but it will have implications for all of you living in areas. Right, this is calling you curb nerds. And I put in that phrase because someone said that one of her kids had called curbs pavement rind. So here you are, something to get excited. It's the first of the Shark on Dutch entrance curbs in the UK being put in Coventry. And I showed you it's precast cement, and that's going in Coventry. Very exciting. This is the Action Vision Zero manifesto for London. There are no police and crime commissioner elections for London. So that's what's been done for London, and you've seen their manifesto for other PCC elections. I always say we shouldn't just focus on the good stuff that's going in, but on the bad stuff, the threats to active travel. And this is the kind of threat we've been worried about. Getting very cheap electric cars imported into Britain, have a lot of idiots saying, oh, look, I've done green. It's all okay now. I don't have to be restricted. And as Chris Boardman has said, they're part of the problem. And you can read what I've said on the RDRF website about electric vehicles. They're better than internal combustion engine vehicles, but they don't give that much of an advantage, and they have all of the major disadvantages like road danger, etc., that internal combustion engine vehicles have. Budgets coming up. The fuel duty freeze has increased UK carbon dioxide emissions by up to 5%. So we don't expect the fuel duty to go back in, the fuel duty accelerator to be resuscitated for the first time since 2009, but it should do. Right, an extremely stupid advertisement from British Gas, Adam Tranter commented on. And you can see this, they're getting it all wrong. So they're trying to say you can go green without having to do anything very unpleasant. So what's unpleasant? Well, riding a bicycle. And that's unpleasant because you can't carry anything on a bicycle. So you show someone with a mattress on your back, like carrying a mattress is what you have to do every day. And not going to say anything about how you can carry mattresses and other big things on e-cargo bikes, etc. We're just going to say that riding a bicycle is not appropriate, and it's bad, and it's very horrible, and you don't have to do it if you buy our stuff. Just everything wrong with it. Okay, a must read on low traffic neighborhoods, right? This is something that came out from Rachel Aldred and her team in this paper, Equity in New Active Travel Infrastructure. It's included in an article in The Guardian, which has got lots of interesting graphics, and you can find it along with their other articles on LTNs here. So you should have all those links. What Rachel says about them is that's your basic headlines with the main conclusion here. New LTNs were generally equitably distributed. Those in most deprived areas 3 times more likely to live in a new LTN than people in richest areas. So it's good evidence, and you'll find it in those 3 places. Go to the Guardian one first. Okay, stuff to do. There's use of ANPR, which is automatic number plate recognition by the police. Survey by the police. Do that now. Don't forget the Police and Crime Commissioner elections. And the Julian Allwood, I think that's the last time I'll stick that up. We're due to have an archive which will be easier to get onto, so I'll put it in there. Headline about Devon cyclists being given helmet cameras to catch dangerous drivers. They're not actually lots of them, and they're not necessarily the best helmet cams, but it's some good news by a police and a police partnership with various organisations in Devon. That's Laura Laker's piece on bike thefts, which I mentioned last week. This is new and must read by Professor Goodwin, Trends in Car Use, Travel Demand and Policy Thinking. And basically he's saying we've got the tools to cut car usage, but there are no cases where all the policy tools have been used to cut car usage. So do read that. Bit dry, but worthwhile. Okay, this was today. Negative attitudes to cyclists affect road space given to them. So basically, people who are anti-cyclist are going to behave worse to cyclists. Now, a lot of you might have said, well, no shit, Sherlock, but it is something that gives a kind of scientific back up to what you would think, what common sense would tell you. So that's something to have a quick look at. Action with regard to High Street Kensington, I'll mention that in the London section. Thread by Mark Hodson, that's done before. Peter Walker's book I've mentioned before. Give to Transport Action Network. Right, now this is a new must read. Reducing Road Danger. It's a big survey by Action Vision Zero on what police in your area are actually doing with regard to road danger. So do have a look at that. That's your new must read. Another must read I mentioned, Joe Dunkley on targets. That's Katrina Swanson's article on trials, which is a short, good article to read. You should read that. That's new. That's the Dreadful Safer Journeys song, which I mentioned last week. New article by Ranty, and a new must read about how SUVs and extra traffic are cancelling out electric car gains. Good study by the Institute for Government on the problems with the Department for Transport. Remember, the Institute for Government is very kind of mainstream establishment organization, so good to read what they've got to say. Good article about children's play, webinar on cycle freight on March 16th. Now, this is your absolutely must read article by Professor Goodwin in Local Transport Today on Grant Shapps' targets. We mentioned that again last week. John Burke, the evidence assessment from DFT, Alexei Sales series of videos, and the National Infrastructure Book from Netherlands, and a series of webinars from the Possible people. There's also a new set of publications from Landor. Okay, diversity page, number of new things. Deprived and Black and minority ethnic school children in London experience greater air pollution burden. Yes. There's a series of panel discussions about women in transport being done by Landor. There is a survey by Cycling UK on women's cycling and well-being, which all of you who are women should take part in. Something good from Kat Swanson's web on inclusive cycle parking. There's going to be the Cycling Diversity Alliance. I think that's today, which you should go for. There's Pave the Way, mentioned before. And what's also new is there's a few webinars being run by Cycling UK. And this one here on Wednesday, the 10th, Breaking Cultural Barriers to Find Female Liberation at just 9 years old, should be interesting. Delay slide is now the what's happening slide. Still concerned about Active Travel England, still about Part 6 Road Traffic Act, and something may be happening with regard to CWIS 2. Watch this space. Just little birds are telling me things. On the ground in the UK, Nottingham, that doesn't look very good. Bit of a complaint about that on Twitter. Liverpool's launched consultation on the next phase of pop-up cycling lanes. Bristol, this is what happens when a bi-directional cycle path just stops. Police have been telling cyclists they commit an offence if following this path after they come off the cycle lane. And where are you supposed to go? So that's not very good in Bristol. Leeds, there's the consultation on what they're doing. Remember a couple of weeks ago, I said they had what seemed to be ambitious aims for Leeds, but they weren't talking very much about how to achieve them apart from maybe considering workplace levies. So do get in on that if you live in Leeds or around it. Coventry, a nice video from Adam Tranter on where the bicycle was invented and forgotten. Do have a look at that. In London, yeah, you know the story about Bishopsgate. What's new is the announcement that 100 kilometres of new or upgraded cycle lanes are delivered or under construction in the city since the pandemic started. Don't forget there are about 14,000 kilometres of road in London. And also, I'm not sure if that's on both sides of the carriageway that they're measuring it. So yeah, some advance, but not as much as we'd like. Right, let me just say something about the starting of enforcement of direct vision cabs. In the early 90s, when I was working in London as a cycling officer, I noticed that about half the deaths of cyclists in London involved HGVs. It was a report by Mark McCarthy, who was in charge of public health in Camden, doing an analysis of the previous 200 deaths. So then started a lot of work to get HGV drivers to be able to see around the cab. This is not only necessary for cyclists, very important for pedestrians, and it doesn't mean that you don't need highway engineering, but it does mean that where you're going to get lorries in the vicinity of cyclists and pedestrians, it would help if the drivers can see around them. So loads and loads of work on that, and now about 25 years later, you've got the first direct vision lorries coming in, and there's a rolling program which will take about 5 years to get most lorries to be in that position. Doesn't mean drivers won't hit cyclists. There's a lot of people have been hit by lorry drivers who weren't looking where they were going and weren't using the visibility that was available to them. So it's really something we've done for the lorry drivers, and it's taken an awful long time to do it. Okay, here's a little piece about the Camden High Line. David Arditi's weighed in saying that it's like the floating pathway along the Thames, networks in disused tunnels, cycle networks in other places up in the air and other stuff. Christian Walmore actually disagrees and says it could be quite good because it'll be done bottom up with community involvement, etc., etc. Anyway, you can read the debate and discussions following a thread from Steve Chambers. Make up your own mind. Okay, Merton, yeah, good news. Well, I put in red, permits for the most polluting cars will cost up to 540 quid, and visitors permits increase as well. So that's good news. I'd like it higher, of course I would, but it is a bit of a step forward for Merton. Hackney, yes, mentioned this cycle lane on Green Lanes, I think it is, last week. Since then, wands have gone in, and here's a shot of the borough actually cleaning them. The brush has to kind of go around the wands a bit awkwardly, but it's being done. So that's nice to see from Hackney. Camden, Gower Street went two-way on Sunday for all traffic, and restrictions on Tottenham Court Road started Monday. I'm going to say a bit more about that, and then George Kalouris from Camden Cycling Campaign will do some explanation. Kensington, Chelsea, do this action now on the link, and the next meeting of Better Streets for RBKC is tomorrow. So do go to that if you're at all interested in the Kensington Chelsea cycle lanes. Don't forget, meeting tomorrow. Brent, the Carlton Vale redevelopment I mentioned last week is still not thought through. And Brent Cycling campaign have done a review on the Brent Cycling, the Brent Healthy Neighbourhood. That's their version of LTNs in the Preston area. And it looks like the trial wasn't a proper trial because they were supposed to have bollards, lockable bollards or camera enforcement. They don't seem to have had. So do look at what Brent Cycling campaigns say about one of Brent's attempts at LTNs. So not too happy about Brent at the moment. And Camden, yeah, this is the point. This scheme has been back and forth for ages and ages, and it does look at the moment like cyclists going ahead up Tottenham Court Road will be at risk of left hooks. On the positive side, there's a plan to audit the entire West End project, which should be done in the next few weeks. Steve, can you let George in now for a couple of minutes? Just to talk?
Yeah, of course, Rob. Yeah, of course, Bob.
Okay. Right, thanks very much, Bob. I just wanted to tell people that this junction is an important, significant part of the massive West End project, which is the removal of the 2-mile-long gyratory, which comprises Gower Street and Tottenham Court Road. So, and this only went live this week. It went live on Monday, as Bob has already mentioned. That is to say, that it's not just the two-way traffic on Gower Street, but this street, Tottenham Court Road, 7 a.m., 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. weekdays and Saturdays is closed to all traffic except buses and cycles, no taxis. It's too early to get a very good impression, really, but our first impression is that the calming effect is really very impressive. That is, the buses are complying to the 20 miles an hour, and they're spaced out, so it doesn't feel bad. There are I'll come to this junction in a minute. We'll have to, obviously we'll have to wait until there's more traffic, because the pandemic has certainly kept the traffic low, to get a good assessment of it. But so what you've got is this street, buses and cycles on Gower Street. You've got two general traffic lanes and 2 segregated cycle tracks. And the overall effect when Tottenham Court Road is closed to traffic is a reduction from something like 5 lanes to 2 for general traffic. So, and our impression is that there has been a very substantial reduction in traffic. Whether it's evaporated, it probably has evaporated, because there's not much option for it to do much else. So just going to this junction, it's a bit of, we're not happy with this junction. It's a bit of a sorry tale, because they did design and implement a separated junction for cycles. That is to say, where you see at the moment a single, you see a single lane for turning left, and a painted lane in the main traffic for going straight ahead. There were 2 such lanes. The signalling was initially was badly placed. Signals are done by TfL, not by Camden, by the way. Was badly placed and was almost invisible to cyclists, and was being ignored. Then they put in one that was visible, and they kept it at 90 seconds between cycle greens, and they recognized that was were going to be too frustrating for cyclists. But and they did say that when we went to 2-way, they would be able to change that. But before that came about, the TfL did a safety audit and concluded it wasn't safe, because cyclists were jumping the red. So we've ended up with this very unsatisfactory design, because of, not really because cyclists were jumping red, because the signaling and the signal timing was so poor, to be honest. We're still talking to Camden. Unfortunately, having put a lot of money into all this, it's going to be difficult to get it changed, but that's where we are on that. That was it. Thank you, Bob.
Thanks, George. Okay, Greenwich, new bidirectional cycle lanes and treatment of the Angerstein roundabout. Comments from Roger Stocker saying that always a problem with motorists not looking left for that direction, and there's weaknesses unless there's lots of band turns, but the roundabout he likes. And there's your graphics from David Hembrow about what needs to happen with greenhouse gases, and a rather nice "Daddy, what did you do in the climate war?" Lovely photos by Chris Kenyon of low traffic neighborhoods in Islington. You don't often see people sitting on curbsides like that. So lovely photos from Chris. And there's a new advert from TfL about idling, a nice photograph of it. And Pudsey Peddler has a series of spoof traffic signs like this one. Some of them are actually a bit rude, so I haven't put them all in, but you can go to his Twitter account if you want to see more. Okay, so that's it. Any questions?
Yeah, anybody got any points? But I will say we're really well hearing from our local correspondents there. So yeah, if Bob's talking about something in your area and you want to chip in, let us know. I thought that worked really well. Did we have a hand up then? Did I mention it? No hands up. Nobody talking. It's quite useful if you use the hand one, because I figured out that I can actually look at that now. Okay, if there's no questions, and yeah, big thanks to George and Bob there as well. I was talking to someone the other day. I think I first got involved in that Tottenham Court Road one 15 years ago.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, it's good to see it happen.
6 years since the consultation. 6 years, yeah.
Yeah, it's been an epic, but yeah,
But
it's an amazing.
I forgot to mention we do hope to do a slightly longer piece on ideas with beers in about 6 weeks' time when we've had a chance to see how it settles down.
Imagine, we'll look forward to that one then. I'll definitely be really interested in that. Okay, if there's no other questions, I'll move on to Sally. Sally, are you there?
Hi, yeah, I'm here.
Hello.
Just gonna share. Can you hear me?
Yeah, all good.
Good. I'll just share my screen. I'm just going to do a quick northeast update, and I've only got 3 slides, so it won't be long. Right, can you see that? The bridges, Bob reported on this last week, and I thought it was just worth adding a little bit of kind of background for people who might have read this and thought this kind of thing might be happening all the time. The commonplace consultation on the bridge closures in Newcastle came to an end mid-Feb. And I mean, we could see within the last week or fortnight that there was just suddenly huge numbers of no's coming on, and they were coming on all through the night. And then there were sort of regular kind of comments that would be repeated every few hours, and then they changed to another set of comments. So it was really apparent that it was being kind of spammed. So I would just say that for those people who thought were very alarmed and thought this could be happening to lots of consultations, that not only was it really obvious, I think Commonplace picked up on it, could see it was happening as well. And actually it was just somebody had set up a Swiss kind of account that made loads of email addresses, and it was just because you have to enter your sort of details about, you know, who you are and where you live and your email address. It is quite easy to, I think, to spot this kind of thing. However, that's not to say that there sometimes isn't sort of low level kind of this kind of thing going on. And one of the things I think that's been really important in Newcastle is that the council has been really clear that this consultation is only one part of their decision-making process, and that they'll look at the comments and then look at a whole other range of data as well. So I think that, you know, I think there's probably a little bit more thought needs to go into how we use these online consultations, what you do with that data. And certainly, I mean, what's useful here is perhaps not so much the quantitative data of how many people support it and don't support it, although it can give you some idea of how far away from a place, you know, people who support or don't support live. It's hard to know whether they're truthful about their mode of transport, but it can give you a really good understanding of how people understand these measures. You know, what is their understanding of air pollution? If they're saying you're going to close this bridge, it's going to increase air pollution, you know, how do you need to do more work on communicating what the benefits are and how you know, think about how you might do that. So I think for you know, both campaigners and for practitioners, there's quite a lot of useful ways of using that data and having a look at what people are saying and how they're saying it, in addition to, you know, also there being a fair number of angry people on there. And the other thing I was going to mention was the e-scooters. We've got an e-scooter trial here, and 5 people have already been charged with drink driving for using them. They've been restricted to I think between 7 and 11, sort of 5 and 11, something like that. You can't use them at night time anymore. And there is a problem with people leaving them on pavements because there's no docking system for them. However, what I would say is I was very ambivalent about e-scooters, and having seen them in action here, I think they're quite positive. There's lots of them about. They're on mainly residential streets, and I think it's quite unnerving for drivers. We have a big problem with speeding, and I can see that people, you know, drivers are perhaps slowing down a little bit in response to that. So it would be interesting. We've got them for a year, I think, so it'll be interesting to see what happens with those. And then finally, we've got a new bit of, it's a link really, it's a bit of it's protected space on a main road, but it links up quite nicely on a sort of missing link on a route. And there was some discussion about where the double yellow lines go in front of the driveway or not in front of the driveways. So I'd be interested to know what people thought about that. So I just cycled along there today and it's really great. And that's me done.
Brilliant, thanks Sally, brilliant as ever. Okay, well, we're going to move on to Eilidh now, who's going to talk to us about parklets. I hope I said your name right.
You did indeed. Yes, you did indeed. Let's see if I can get the right thing up. Can you see my screen?
Yep, you're all good.
Excellent, good. So you might be wondering why we're going to be talking about parklets today, but I think they have got a real big, important part to play in LTNs, and more importantly, in keeping LTNs when it comes to consultation time. So I'm going to go through very briefly the history of them, some examples in London, the different types of parklets there are, and why they contribute so much, in my view, to LTNs. So the history of parklets, they, unsurprisingly enough, started off in San Francisco, 2005, when some tactical urbanists, I think they called them activists, they called themselves, they just put some money in a parking meter, rolled out some grass, stuck a few plants, and stayed in that spot all day, which was absolutely revolutionary at the time. A piece of road taken up not by a car. And then 14 years later, we had, it might have well been the first one in London, but we certainly had the first one in North London in Hackney, when Brenda, who might be on the call tonight, I'm not sure, set up her parklet in Hackney, and that's the image on the right. So parklets are basically spaces where people and nature can come together. They're somewhere to stop, to sit, to chat. Children can play, old people can rest. They've got all sorts of uses. They provide greenery, they can provide art. I've got some examples later on of parklets where there were book clubs and Christmas meets and all sorts of things. They're a very simple way, and usually should be a cheap way, of increasing green space, allowing biodiversity, and of course, at the moment, a bit of help with social distancing and allowing people to get outside, people who don't have access to their own gardens. So whether they're community parklets or council parklets, commercial parklets, they can really help to green the urban environment and provide a real green beating heart for a community, which is in fact just what LTNs do. So here are a couple of examples. The one on the left was the first commercial parklet we had here in Islington. You can just see on the left-hand side the red ribbon. There was a ceremony to open it, and a red ribbon was cut. This is outside a community centre in St Luke's, down near Old Street. And as you can see, it's very smart. It's looking a bit tattered at the moment because the greenery hasn't come back, but it's a very well-built, very professionally built parklet by one of the many commercial parklet producers. I think it was Mersman who made this one. Some more examples of commercial parklets. The one on the left is up near the Whittington Hospital in Islington, outside a little cafe. And it's a bit of a green oasis for the nurses and the medics to just get out on their breaks and sit in a wee bit of green off quite a grey urban sort of road leading up to Highgate. The one on the right is a new one. It's in Smithfield, a play parklet. It actually took the place of what I thought was a fantastic use for a black cab. There was a black cab, old black cab there, with no roof. Somebody had put some plants in it and it sat there. You could go in and sit on it and there were a few plants and you could just be outside on a really unique, fun parklet. So it was obviously decided that that one was a wee bit too shabby. And it was replaced by this very shiny new one, which children just love. So that's a relatively new one. So all those examples have been commercial parklets. Moving on now, we've got a couple of community parklets. The one on the left, again, is Brenda's parklet up in Hackney, overlooking London Fields at the rear of it. Usually where this mum and child are sitting, there'd be a great big van blocking the view and taking up space. So that's much, much nicer. The one on the right is a little community herb parklet up in Hackney. I think there's a couple of figures to bear in mind here. Cars in London are parked over 90% of their time. I think it's as high as 95. The Centre for London had that statistic, which I thought was quite interesting. And car ownership in London, particularly in central London, is nearly 60%. And our public realm is dominated by cars. I have never done a consultation when anybody has bothered to ask me how I want my public realm to be used. I know what the answer would be, but public realm by default at the moment seems to be given over to cars, which is why LTNs are so good. Another couple of, there's a community parklet and a gorilla parklet. The one on the left is Culverston Crescent in Hackney, which has got a personality all of its own. We arranged for a couple of bike rides up there back in 2019. Took some councillors and interested others on a ride round. The one on the right is a gorilla parklet, again in Islington. Sorry about the focus on Islington, it's my home patch. With some examples of the biodiversity and the wildlife on it. So the little ladybird family on the leaf on the left has been of massive interest to local children going to school. And you can just about see a bee on that lily on the right. That was created by 2 residents back in 2019, and it's been under threat more or less ever since. The latest thing that the council are doing is to put out little plastic notices saying that they're blocking the pavement, which they're not. So councils have a big role to play in enabling and not preventing green space for everybody. An interesting development recently has been parklets supporting people, the population, the community and local businesses during the pandemic. The one on the left is in Brixton. You probably can't read on the little signs on the chairs there, but it's all about sit down at a social distance and have a chat and enjoy just being outside with a few plants round about. The one on the right is outside a restaurant in Leytonstone. And this one, I believe, was done with the help of the council, the support of the council. Obviously, the Marrakesh Delight is getting ready for its joyous reopening, when they'll have this nice little area outside the cafe, which will help with social distancing. So it was very nice to hear of a council actually enabling that. Tree pits. They're quite pretty, tree pits. I'll tell you why I'm including them later. There's examples of 3. The strawberries on the right were my harvest last year from my tree pit. I washed them thoroughly before I ate them, and I'm still here to tell the tale. So it is possible to grow edible plants in tree pits, even in London. So that was a rapid tour through all the different kinds of parklets. We've got the commercial ones, the community ones. I didn't have an example of a pocket park, but a pocket park is a little green unused space, which is not usually used to park a car, but could be made into something green. And we've got tree pits. So commercial parklets like the ones I showed you earlier can cost £30,000 and more. They are pretty expensive to do. They take a bit of time to make. There's a cost for upkeep, and there's a lot of red tape. There's public realm stuff, there's insurance, there's drainage, there's all sorts of things that need to be done, which, to be fair, you need for community parklets as well. But the difference with community parklets is that they are much, much cheaper to do. They're done by the community and they can cost a couple of £100. They could be made out of pallets. People donate plants, they go into next door. People have always got surplus plants. And it's the community who look after it and keep it. So they've got a vested interest in looking after it and keep it looking nice. Pocket parks are pretty straightforward to do. There's usually a little bit of red tape involved. Tree pits, there's none. Even in Islington, the process for getting a tree pit is so simple. It's a delight. You fill out a form, name and address. You promise to keep your tree pit well maintained. Put a red ribbon around the tree so it doesn't get sprayed with horrible chemicals, and away you go. A tree pit is often a way to get people into doing little micro greening activities like that for the community. That's why I mentioned them, because people start with a tree pit, they might move on to a planter, then they might get together with residents to fight for a parklet. And at the moment, there's a focus on cafes and restaurants being allowed to apply for pavement licenses. I think they're £100 a year, something like that. So they can use the space outside their business to enable social distancing. The main drawback to that, I mean, it's a fab idea, but there is a drawback to that, and that the furniture has got to be removed at night. So it's got to be set up and then cleared away every day. Now, why do I think that parklets contribute to LTNs? Well, these are a couple of pictures of where the modal filter is in fact a planter. And the one on the right, you can just see somebody's attached a little seat to it. So that's sort of the beginning of a parklet. So they serve quite a nice little focal point for an LTN. LTNs aren't just about getting people out cycling and walking. We need to encourage more people to use and to cherish and value their LTNs. Older people, children, all sorts of people. We had a webinar last week, which Bob put up on his update, which was all about the health benefits of being able to get out into green space during the pandemic. And William Bird of Intelligent Health, who was our main speaker, has got all the data behind the diseases and the physical and mental damage that is done to people when they can't get outside. We are wired to be outside. We are creatures of the outside. Absolutely fascinating what he did. So LTNs provide these calm, quiet, not quite back to nature, but getting there places that people can go out and enjoy right across the community. You don't have to cycle to enjoy an LTN. It can be for absolutely everybody. This was some examples of a new parklet which is being built down in Lambeth. So you go from the creation top left, bottom right, there's a lovely little seat for a child to sit on, in the middle, cats having a good look around, and top right, it's been equipped with a chessboard and various other things. And now the team doing it are beginning to plant the plants. It'll look absolutely fab when it's done. So that will provide that particular LTN with an absolutely beautiful green heart, which people will become attached to. LTNs here, I think they are a key part of the jigsaw to green our urban environment. Lots of things contribute to it, things I've talked about today, but obviously school streets, that's another big contributor to it. They encourage the community to work together. We're going to be coming up to consultations this year. We obviously want people to suggest improvements to their LTNs, but we don't want them to be ripped out. We want people to value them for what the massive number of benefits they can get from them. So if we can get a few tree pits and a few pocket parks, and ideally a parklet in each one, that would make an LTN, I think, much more likely to be voted to keep than to be ripped out, as we have sadly seen. So in summary, we want everyone to get out there and enjoy them. We want people to be able to be in pleasant, green, inviting neighbourhoods. Once people have experienced the benefit of living in an LTN, that will inform their decision making when the consultations come out. I've talked a lot about the green beating heart. I'm absolutely convinced that parklets are a key contributor to an LTN from that point of view. And we need positive responses to the consultations. A big recent campaign has been launched by Brenda and Sarah. I'm not sure, I think I saw Sarah on the call tonight. We've got over 40 members and rising. It's a fantastic group to be part of. There's lots of sharing of experience and guides and how to approach your council and what to do and what not to do. And the aim is to put pressure on boroughs right across London. And it could obviously go wider. It's not just London-based parklets, but this group is focusing on London, to persuade councils to enable parklets and not dissuade them by pricing them out of everybody's pockets. And underneath our logo on the right is how you can follow us or keep in touch with us if you want any more information. So that's me. I hope it didn't take too long. Thank you very much for the time and the opportunity. Yeah,
thanks, Eilidh. That was great. I was thinking of Gorilla Strawberries for most of that now. Let's get into that one now.
They were very good, actually.
Very good. So yeah, has anybody got any questions? I think Brenda, did you want to come in and have a bit of a comment? Well, we got you. I think she is anyway. She was here a minute ago. I thought
okay.
Brenda
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. Yeah, just wanted to say thanks so much, Eilidh. That was really, really useful. Really useful background and lots of detailed information about the different sorts of parklets. And yes, to let everyone know, we have got now a London Parklet campaign going. We're on Twitter at London Parklet. We're on Instagram. We're on Facebook. We'll have a website soon. And we're just, we're campaigning for a London, well, a process across London for an easy application for a parklet, a community parklet, and we could extend it to tree pits as well. You know, if Paris can do it, then why can't we? It's just that different London boroughs have different approaches towards parklets. There's no, most of them just forbid it completely, and you know, you have to be really determined or persistent as an individual to get a single parklet that might take you 10 or 20 years to achieve. And so it's really just not on, you know, we want to, why should it take that long, and why should it require so much effort just to get a single parklet? And so that's what we're trying to get, residential community parklets, a good process for them, which is so important. As lockdown eases, to allow people to socially distance outdoors. Yeah, and we want to encourage the cafe one too. You know, the government cafe licensing act is going to finish in September. It should carry on long beyond that. You know, no one's going to invest in infrastructure if it's only until September. So it does need to be extended. And I hope the government sees sense and extends it. And we want them to say, yeah, extend it and allow some sort of permanent features as well, because at the moment, the pavement licensing says everything has to be taken up at the end of the day. So how do you put planters out? And so it's really, really, really tough for cafes to have to put everything back in at the end of the day. When you want to put nice planters and screens and pots outdoors, particularly if you're paying for it through the license. So yeah, just encourage everyone, if you'd like to join our campaign, then please get in touch. Thank you.
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks. Elaine, did you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you very much. No, this is really, really interesting to me and music to my ears. I'm a councillor on the Green Administration in Brighton and Hove. I put a request in for community parklets to the Environment and Transport Committee. It was accepted. We just had the budget. We've got a lovely big chunk of money to spend on parklets. I said parklets initially, and then when they did the budgeting, they called it pocket parks. And now I've learned that there are two different things. So I'm getting all so edgy. Am I going to get the wrong thing? My initial idea is community parklets, but of course we want things next to businesses because that's where people might like to sit down and relax. We live, I'm leading on an LTN, the first one in the city, so I've got all of that in the mix, which is brilliant and exciting but challenging. And we just don't have any processes yet. We've got quite a lot of money for community parklets. I've seen that some boroughs do kind of fund matching, or they put some money in the pot and then the community pays for the rest. So I would just like some, first of all, is it a parklet? Is it a pocket park? I think it's a parklet from what we just heard, but yeah. And just the procedures and the processes of how you go about from zero to a city full of parklets, or, you know, with at least sort of 10 or 12 community parklets or something like that.
Do you want to come back, Brenda or Eilidh?
Yeah, well, that's exactly what we want. We want a simple, accessible procedure for across London that can be used in other cities. Other cities have these. New York has a one-page application form. Vienna encourages residents to apply for parklets and has a very simple online form. So why can't we develop something like that makes it really easy and accessible for residents to apply for a parklet on their street? We're talking about community parklets, and complementing those. Yes, you do need cafe parklets are more conventional. and are more acceptable to local authorities. And the government accepts them and wants to encourage them, through its Business and Planning Act. It's trying to encourage businesses. So the government still doesn't see the logic or the need for community parklets for people on residential streets to have them. No one sees that except residents themselves. So yes, both are very important. In terms of whether you call it a pocket park or a parklet, or whether you call it a people parking bay, I think the objective is, so long as it takes space, so long as it's on the carriageway, that's useful. You want it to be on the carriageway and taking up tarmac space. Preferably rip out the tarmac, but otherwise put something on the tarmac to hide it and to create a lovely community space, or a space for people to to spill out from a cafe. So it doesn't matter what it's called. It's just taking away. For us, it's about taking away a space for storing cars or even moving cars, and replacing it with people space. That's a huge objective.
And I think the other thing, Brenda, if I could just add, and that is getting the council working together, getting all the different council departments working together,
Yes.
and not working in silos. So we want public realm to talk to green space, to talk to whoever they need to talk to, because otherwise you can get held up in bureaucracy for years, as we found out.
That's so true. I mean, in every borough itself, there are about 4 different departments that need permission, that you need permission from to get a single parklet. You need planning permission, you need highways permission, you need licensing and markets permission, and there's probably and street scene also. Well, highways, parking, licenses, and planning. So you need all these departments within a single council. So it's, let alone having a simple, consistent process across London. It is an absolute nightmare at the moment. If the councils could get their act together, that would be brilliant. But councils don't feel any political need to support parklets at the moment. So we're trying to create that political space, where we create we're trying to give them that political space where parklets becomes an important thing for them to consider.
David Harrison, did you have a question? Just take one more.
Oh, yeah, hi, Brenda, great talk. Thank you. I was having a chat with Islington officers the other day and raised this, and they're obviously very uncertain as to whether pavement licenses would allow cafes to put tables and chairs out on a parking space in the highway as opposed to on the pavement. So it'd be great to circulate a list of councils that have allowed, under the pavement licensing scheme, tables and chairs to go on the highway in parking spaces, so that we can show to uncertain councils what is possible. Yeah,
just to quickly come back on that. There's some councils have a varied approach. Some of them just don't like anything on the carriageway, they don't want to get rid of their beloved parking. But other councils, Westminster allow removable chairs and tables on the carriageway for cafes. Many other councils do that. Camden has gone a step further and actually does the ETO for parking, removal of that parking, and provides barriers, unfortunately very ugly plastic red and white barriers, to protect the removable furniture. A few boroughs have gone even further, and so Barnet have allowed, Barnet officers went and knocked on the doors of cafes and said, do you want to put your chairs and tables out on the high street? This is the A1000 that's got fast moving traffic. And when they said yes, it was the parklets officer who put out the screens, the wooden screens and the planters to give permanent protection to the outdoor seating, and with 3 parking spaces. And it's wonderful. You're cycling past and there's this amazing, on the high street with cars whizzing by, parklet out on the highway. So Barnet has, I don't know how Barnet, I don't know who the person was, but this is what the cafe told us, that the council officer came and suggested it to us and offered it to us. Waltham Forest, going a step further, I don't know if Simon Capper's on this talk, but he's worth really getting in here to give you a talk, working for Waltham Forest, building, you know, going to cafes and saying, wouldn't it be nice if you put your chairs and tables out on the carriageway, and I will make it easy for you by putting these beautiful screens with cascading plants going down them. Really amazing, wrought iron. They look like wrought iron. I don't know what they are. And really amazing. And just providing the boundary and inviting cafe owners to put their chairs and tables out. I mean, how extraordinary is that? So you get one extreme where they say, no, Islington, no chairs and tables out, disobeying the law, because the Planning and Business Act says you have to allow cafes to use the highway. You know, the highway isn't defined. I think highway includes pavement as well as the carriageway. And
to be fair,
and then Walthamstow, which is just amazingly on the other extreme, encouraging cafes and facilitating them to have outdoor seating.
I think, to be fair, Brenda, Islington were just uncertain about what applied. But all this stuff is on your on the London Parklet website, is it?
Well, we haven't got it up yet. We only just started.
Oh, great. But when it is, it'll be incredibly usful to point out.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think I might draw this bit to a close at the moment. I know there's a few people who wanted to ask questions, but I want to introduce, well, maybe we'll get a chance at the end. Mark Hodson back again, who was so good last week. We thought we've got to give him another run to tell us about some of the operations he's been up to. So, yeah, I'm not sure. I should just call you Mark. Is there like a, I don't know police terminology, but hopefully you're here and haven't run off.
I generally answer to anything. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, all good.
Okay, right. I'm just going to share my screen. Hopefully everybody else will see it. Give me a moment. Okay, everybody see that?
Yeah, it's coming up. Yeah, you're all good.
Fantastic. Right, yeah, let's get the slideshow on so it looks proper. Oh, brilliant. That's it. Right. It's not quite displaying how I wanted it to, but never mind. Let's try again. Okay, right, yeah, we'll go with that. Right. Yes, thank you for having me back. This time I was asked to do some talks on the operations that we've run over the years, and Bob asked me to start with close pass and third party reporting. This is going to be a chronological sort of thing, starting way back in 2014, believe it or not, and we'll run through how the operations evolved, what their benefits were, a few pitfalls, and where we are now with it all. So basically, what happened was, as if it gets to work how I want it to, right, back in 2014, myself and Steve been working together for a while, and an inspector came to us. It's the inspector, you can see that picture there, standing at the front with his white hat on. Inspector Jennings said, do you want to do some work around cyclists? And we were both mad keen cyclists, to the point where we used to cycle into work together every day. We said, yeah, want to do some work about cycling in work time? Fantastic, you know, no problem at all, we'll do that. And we started working with Birmingham City Council and Think Bike, all about the exchanging places with the blind spot mats, and that's what we started doing. And that's how initially we got into it, and we had great fun. You know, in the summer of 2014 through to March 2015, basically going around all over the place with the blind spot mat, showing cyclists the blind spots on trucks. You've probably all seen it before, and vice versa, some truck drivers as well. In hindsight, wasn't the right thing to do, but like I said, we had a great time. That's us with Ned at the cycle show. We took it to the cycle show. The one thing I will say is when we did take the truck out, the chap you can see there with his back to us is a chap called Paul, and he worked for Jaguar Land Rover, and Jaguar Land Rover are absolutely brilliant. They give us the truck. It's one of their internal logistics trucks, and a driver, and then they pay the overtime for him to do it on his day off as well. We never got paid overtime to do it, but he was a mad keen cyclist, Paul was. And what was great about Paul is when we had truck drivers come up and start complaining about cyclists, he could give the other angle, if you like, and say, I drive the truck and I ride a push bike all the time. This is how it plays out in reality. So that was the one thing that came out of it that I thought, you know, maybe that's something we can take forward. But like I said, we took it everywhere. That's us in Cannon Hill Park, in King's Heath, exactly the same. But what it gave us opportunity to do was engage with all the cyclists in the area and nationally when we went to the cycle show and get their views on what was needed, what put them off cycling, if you like, commuting. There's lots of recreational cyclists who were not utility cyclists, which is really what we wanted to do in partnership with the council. We wanted to increase cycling numbers, you know, wanted children cycling to school, wanted people cycling to work. So we started to change our mindset about what we were doing. Although we enjoyed greatly what we were doing, it wasn't, if you like, giving the people the confidence to go out there and change their way of travel, you know, that you create that modal shift that we all strive for. And like I said, but it was great fun, to the point where there we are with the Team Sky car, and that's one of Bradley's bikes, one of Bradley Wiggins's bikes we used to take around with us. It was far too large for me to ride. Steve, being 6'3", he could get on it though, and I just drove around the car pretending to be a director sportive. I think that was basically what I did in that. So that was it. That was what we were doing. One last slide on that, what we were doing. That's us outside the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. The reason we included that is because on that particular day, we had a news crew from the local ITV News turn up that day. And we dealt with the press plenty of times in the past, but that was my first negative experience with the press, really, and cycling, whereby the team that turned up, they basically wanted, you know, some footage of, you know, a cyclist nearly being, you know, taken off a bike, and they were most disappointed when they found out they weren't going to get it. So that's when I started, you know, sort of changing my attitude towards the press and thinking, you know, I've got to be careful what I do with them and basically use them to my advantage. These are the sorts of things we'd been looking at previously, the behaviour of cyclists. There's some cyclists going across a green light, straight in front of a car, if you like. And this is one from our patrol. You can't see it there, but that's an actual cyclist, that is, going the wrong way up a slip road onto the A45 in Birmingham. You know, no problem at all for us on patrol. Saw them a mile off, as you can if you're looking properly. It doesn't matter if people got lights on or what they're wearing, even in the darkness like that in the middle of November, early in the morning. If you're looking properly, you can always see them. But like I said, it wasn't achieving what we wanted to do overall. We had a change of mindset, basically. I was getting more and more into evidential policing. And there's two quotes I always use from Rear Admiral Grace Hopper when I'm presenting about what we did and what changed. The first one is, the most dangerous phrase in the language is, we've always done it that way. And the police are so guilty of doing that. They really are. I mean, as an organisation, we always fall back on what we think works instead of trying new things. And the second quote that Grace Hopper is famous for is, a ship in port is safe, but that's not what ships are built for. And that's so true in policing as well. We can sit there and we can say, we've always done this, but you need to go out and change things. And that's what we decided to do. And it was the perfect time to do it. And this is why a lot of people say, how come you were able to do it and other police forces weren't? And this is part of the reason, really. For a start, we had a very good team. Now, that is our team from 2014. Now, everybody in that picture there cycled to work and cycled back from work, no matter what the shift was. That's the whole traffic team there. Apart from Abby, who basically drove the team car when we went away on cycling trips. She used to take everything, you know, that we needed for our camping trips when we cycled there. And if you were around Chelmsford Police Station in that summer, if you were about between midnight and 3 o'clock in the morning, depending on what time we all finished, you would see all of us cycling home in a pain gang, basically, all together. So we had the right-minded people. And when we started doing it, we had a great hierarchical setup as well. Our sergeants were very good. You know, the sergeants at the time, a chap called Andy Darks, had cycled to work along the A34 Stratford Road for many years. If everybody knows Birmingham, that's a scary road to cycle along at the best of times. Then we had a sergeant at Laura Floyd, massively supported, an inspector called Jason Ways, who did Ironmen and, you know, or really took on board the vulnerable road users, all the way up to, if you like, our PCC, and our chief, Dave Thompson, cyclist himself, and our PCC, David Jameson, ex-Transport Minister, really got why we were trying to do and how valuable road safety work was, but in particular addressing the greatest threat of harm, which is what we got stuck into, straight away. We realised, if you're going to change something, you're going to change an environment, you've got to address the greatest threat of harm. And the way I always said it to people who didn't really get it, I said, if you came to the police and said, my son, my daughter, my wife won't go down the local shops because of the behaviour of a group of people on the street corner, and it's either antisocial or that they're offending, intimidating them, the police would go out and do something about that. And it's exactly the same with people who want to cycle and say, oh, I won't cycle on the road because of the behaviour of motorists. It's exactly the same scenario. You've got to change those people's behaviour to stop them intimidating people. If somebody else's behaviour is stopping somebody making a positive lifestyle choice, it's really something that has to be addressed. And that's the way we viewed driver behaviour and addressing the greatest threat of harm. And that's really how we got the backing. And like I said, luckily our organisation got it and we went forward with it. And then we started thinking about what we were going to do and experimented with the law, and that suck it and see comes from our legal department, believe it or not. Many years ago, I started an operation called Operation Hercules, which was all about illegal street racing. And I phoned them one day, our legal services department, and said, oh, I've got an idea around seizing cars based on modifications and whether there's been street racing. And I said, what do you think? And then literally the lawyer on the other end of the phone, he said, well, Mark, the law's basically a case of you've got to suck it and see, you've got to, give it a go. And, if it works in court, it works. If not, you can say you've tried it. And that's how we went forward with everything we did. And it was a bit of a thing, it became a thing for me to say, never been tried before, we're going to try it, nothing. People will say, well, you can't do that, and you say, well, why not? Oh, it was a case of we've never done it before. And so look, we went out and tried it. And so me and Steve had discussions about what we were going to do going forward, how we're going to address the greatest threat of harm, and that's how Operation Close Pass came about. About the same time, in about 2014, long before things like Operation Snap and the Next Base portal, we started experimenting with third-party reported video. The first one we ever did, and unfortunately I've been looking for the stills from the prosecution, I can't find them, was from a cyclist that used to cycle along the Heartlands Parkway in Birmingham, quite a busy road. And the scenario was he was cycling to work one morning and a 44 tonner pulled straight out in front of him, and if he hadn't braked he would have gone underneath it. But the footage was brilliant, that it really was. And he sent us the footage, and I said, this is the one I'm going to start with. I know we can do it. We've been using footage as traffic officers from our cars for years. We're going to use this person's footage. And we did, and I sent off the notice of intended prosecution to the transport manager of the company. And 3 days later, I had a phone call off the transport manager saying, I've got a driver who's very worried he's going to lose his license, because I sent off a load of still clips of exactly what had happened. He said, what's going to happen with him? And I said, well, I said, fill out the notice of intended prosecution, send it back. And if his driver history is suitable, I said, he can have a course for due care and attention. And he was over the moon with that. And so that reaction basically from the transport manager made me think, yeah, we've got a way forward with this. And then that's how we started with the third party reporting. That grew and grew, but I'll go into that in a bit. At the same time, we were discussing about how to, because everybody we talked to when we've been going around talking to cyclists at cycling shows said, drivers just pass us too close. This is the one thing that really puts me off cycling on the road, pass us too close. So basically we had a discussion. I said to Steve, I said, right, I've got a camera now, because I bought a camera back then, and it was a Garmin Verb Elite, more just to film my own cycling. That was it, replay stuff going downhill really fast and stuff like that. I said, I'm going to take it out. And I said, if I get any offences, I said, we'll start with those. And in basically October 2015, I think, no, it was October 2014, sorry. This was the very first close pass ever dealt with by the police based on video, the very first close pass prosecution, and it was in a village called Ansley Common in Warwickshire. And that's the first shot. As you can see, we come up to a pinch point and the driver thought he'd overtake me there. And the great thing about the Garmin Verb is that I could overlay all my data, which I was obsessed with at the time when I was younger and a bit fitter. And you had things like your cadence sensor and your speed and everything on there. And basically that's how it ended up like that. And you can see my cadence dropped right off because actually I had to pull my knee in because I thought it was going to be hit at the time by the driver. And that was the first offence. And the reason that became the first offence is because the driver stopped up the road, about 50 yards up the road. He stopped dead, didn't indicate. And basically, I thought he was brake checking me, but he wasn't. He was on his phone, looking at his phone at the time. So I pulled alongside him, knocked on the window, out came the warrant card, and I cautioned him, reported him on camera. And when I was back at work later that week, out when the notice of intent and prosecution again, which was replied to. And that is the very first close pass ever, you know, if you like, reported and prosecuted, although he obliged himself to a course in the UK and probably the world that was. I don't know of any one that's happened before that. And that was the start of it. That was the first one. He took the course and then ironically after the course, he made a complaint, an official complaint. And came out with a story, said we doctored the footage, which was quite funny, really, because we supplied him with a copy of the footage, as you know, just to be fair. And he said there was a beeping noise, and he said he'd been told the beeping noise was where we doctored the footage. The beeping noise was my Garmin pausing at the time on the footage. And so, you know, that was the story of that one. And in the end, that went away when it proved we'd done everything right. And that was the start of it. And then, you know, we started with a couple of others, and here's another one that you've probably seen. That's a car that's actually exited from the junction on the near side, straight in front of me, on another ride. Again, you know, sort of a near miss, and that's me waving my appreciation at them at the time. And so we started we using our own footage, and we had a few cracking ones. That's another one. That's a truck that tried to put me underneath its wheels going to work. That's in Coleshill on the way to Chelmsford Police Station. And we started to use footage from a group of cyclists, local cyclists. And we had cyclists from Coventry. We had George Reeves, who's a big We Are Cycling UK regional coordinator. Sort of in the Sandwell, West Brom area, with the cyclists in Solihull, we had a couple in Birmingham, and we knew from conversations we'd had with previous work, we could trust them to send us footage and it would be okay to use. And our rule of thumb was that if it was 100% certain, you know, ones like you see there, it'd take your breath away when you watch the footage, we'd use it. And we started putting them through. And the only problem that I had with the third-party footage as we went through, and after about 18 months, we got up to about 350 cases of third-party footage for all sorts of offences. By then, we're using them for phone offences, we're using them for parking offences on zigzags, close pass stuff, you know, good due care attentions. It really was a case of, I never had a not guilty plea at court, which is what I really craved, just to test the law, if you like, you know, to test it out, everything we're doing in court. And as we went through, we did get a couple of eventually a couple of not guilty cases, which I'll come on to in a bit. But that was the one thing that we were craving at the time. But at the same time, we needed to do something operationally, and that's when Operation Close Pass came about. And that began with a conversation with Birmingham City Council. We worked with some great people from Birmingham City Council, and we sat down with a woman called Mandy Slater. We'd done lots of work with the truck. And when we said we're not going to do the truck, the blind spot, because it's not working for us, what we want to achieve anymore, she carried on that work, you know, taking it into schools, because we'd had a discussion and said, it's great for kids to teach them about the danger around trucks, but weren't working for us. You know, it wasn't what we were doing, working with what we wanted to do to address our greatest set of harm and things. So we sat down with Mandy Slade. She said, what do you want to do then? And we said, we want to do this operation. And Steve just basically said, we want to put Mark down the road and see if anybody kills him. And that's the way he put it. And he said, if they don't kill him, we want to get them in and basically tell them why they shouldn't be trying to kill Mark on the bike if there's a police officer. And then we can then, using that, if we can send Mark out as a, you know, a very experienced cyclist, as a bike ability trainer, we can then say, look, we've got a cyclist here that's doing everything right. And when we send him out for a couple of hours, during that couple of hours, his life's been endangered several times by drivers. So if he's doing everything right with his road experience, what's the average cyclist suffering on a daily basis? And then using that, we can use that as an evidential basis to go forward and say to drivers, this is why we're doing it. You can say all you like about cyclists and what they do, but here's our police officer going out, doing everything right, lit up like a Christmas tree, whatever you want him to do, you know, and you're endangering him. As a group of people, you're endangering him. So, you know, this is why we were having to do it. And it was great and it worked. And then so we launched in 2016. By this time, when we launched, we had a great team of partners involved. We Are Cycling UK, with Duncan Dollymore. We had Bob involved, you know, with the Road Danger Reduction Forum. We had Chris Boardman come along to the launch, you know, really, really supportive group of people. And it worked, you know, the media coverage was absolutely fantastic. And this is the way they went. This is one of the photos you see all the time. And again, another thing, everybody thinks that's me on the bike. It's not. I was front of house that day doing a lot of press stuff and a lot of interviews. And that's a chap called Chris Brock, who worked on our team at the time. And he was a Sky cycling leader, really good, you know, ride leader, a really good cyclist and a hobby cyclist. Again, commuted every day by bike, no matter what the weather. And that's him on the bike. So that's not actually me, you see. And the reason we got a Trek bike is because Chris Boardman came along and we couldn't use any Boardman bikes. And all my bikes are generally Boardman. Well, mine is, apart from a Dolan. And so we used Chris's Trek, Chris Brock's Trek as well. And then, you know, the mat, we had the mat, and We Are Cycling UK there, and afterwards gave all the police forces a free mat. And the mat is purely, you know, you see that shot a lot, and it wasn't meant to be a publicity shot. It's an educational tool, that mat is, and we had to have they call it the chat on the mat, but it's got to replicate, you know, it's got to be a worthwhile experience for the driver, because it takes the place of them being prosecuted or paying for a course. And so it had to work. And that design, that final design we came up with, is the one that worked best for us on the mat. And Steve used to do a lot of the education at the start, talking to the cyclists, and then it moved over to, we used fire service to do the actual education on the mat. The reason being is we found running through that people are more receptive to people they think they're going to help them, and the police uniform comes with a lot of baggage for a lot of people for very different reasons. Some people have good experiences with the police, some people have bad experiences, and if they're talking to a police officer, they basically think they're being told off. And so we started using the fire service, and we used Woodgate Valley predominantly, their crew. They had a lot of cyclists, and they were really, really good. And the feedback from the people we had on the mat is that they were a lot better than us, just because they perceived the fire service to be, you know, people who go out there and help people, and the message came across clearer. The only people we found who were better than the fire service, regards drivers being receptive, is that if we use paramedics. But paramedics are always busy, and we couldn't get paramedics that often to do it, so we stuck with the fire service, and that worked really well. And so Operation Close Pass was up and running, and most of you know about Close Pass, and the rest is history, really. And while that was going on, the third-party reporting grew and grew, and we had some court cases. Our first court case for a trial was with George Reeves, who I mentioned earlier, who is a regional coordinator from We Are Cycling UK. Had one with a heavy goods vehicle. It was a rigid heavy goods vehicle. I remember the trial well, and basically the trial went ahead, and George was cross-examined, as was the driver, and the driver says, you know, I'm a class 1 driver, I've got this experience, I never did anything wrong. The great thing about George Reeves was he's a class 1 driver too. And I'd put in an expert witness statement regards the standard of George's cycling, from my, you know, police experience and my, you know, cycling coaching qualification. And basically the summing up in the magistrate said, but you know, exactly what we always wanted. You know, as a professional driver, you should know better. You're far too close. There's your 5 points. There's your £600 fine. And so we walked out of court and said that, yeah, that's the first time it's been tested. We were very happy with that. And but by this point, we were getting on for like 500 cases we dealt with third party. And the workload has been too much, becoming too much. And what we were starting to find is, because we were starting to take footage from a couple of drivers as well, from dash cam footage, is that we were getting, you know, sort of a lot of very useful footage, but we literally, time constraints meant me and Steve couldn't action them all. And we were getting stuff like this, and you know, sort of what you see there is one driver endangering everybody in the road at the same time. You know, close past the cyclist, nearly hit the car head on. There's somebody who really needs to be dealt with. And what we found was we were getting all these bits of footage, and they were just absolutely, you know, sort of what we wanted as traffic officers, because we can't be everywhere at the same time. But it gave us opportunity to deal with literally the most dangerous drivers on the road, because although we can't be everywhere at the same time, there's always could be somebody with a camera. And that was the thinking behind Operation Close Pass. It's a psychological thing where, and I'll talk about this later, because I said I'd mention about the Exeter news that Bob talked about earlier, where they're giving people cameras and why it's such a good thing. But basically, and I always used to use this expression when I presented to other police forces, and I said I'd never use it in public, and I don't really think this is public because it's by invite only, but you weaponize every cyclist on the road against road harm. Every driver suddenly thinks that that cyclist is carrying a camera, and they start behaving around them because of that. They may not like it, you know, sort of, they may not like vulnerable road users, but what they don't like is being prosecuted, and that's what the whole, you know, scenario creates. They don't know if it's the undercover police officer on a bike. I don't know whether it's a cyclist with a camera who's going to submit the footage, and so it just changes their behaviour. And that's what we wanted, as you know, from our point of view as a police force. We wanted that change in behaviour, because as I've talked about it last week, it cuts demand for us. We get less collisions, you know, less reports of dangerous driving, fantastic. And from a you know, sort of our partner's point of view, you create an environment where people are suddenly happy to go out on the road on a push bike, whether that's because they think the drivers are going to behave, you know, differently, and they genuinely did. We saw that. We saw drivers changing differently, or they thought that they had a bit of empowerment, that if they were become a victim, they had some kind of, you know, sort of recompense. They could report the driver and do something themselves. Big part of it was the media and getting it right. Last week, you probably picked up on that. I said there's no such thing as, you know, sort of a bad media when it comes to things like this, just awareness. We worked with a chap at West Mids called Brig Ford, and Brig was very unusual when it comes to sort of a police communication department, in that police corporate comms departments are very used to firefighting. They don't do a lot of what I'd call aggressive comms, if you like, putting stuff out there. They're more used to dealing with criticism, whereas what we had with Brig was a partner who put our message across in the right way. So when we were challenged, we were able to respond in the right manner, and he put together some great stuff with us and gave us some real good opportunities. You know, within, you know, 2 months of launching Operation Close Pass, we were on the One Show. So there we were at prime time, 7 o'clock, going out to 7.5 million people. And suddenly we, you know, those 7.5 million people watch the One Show, tell another 7.5 million people, if they just told one more person in their family or somebody at work, and we were spreading the word. And again, when it comes to behaviour change, it was very important. 2 appropriate media opportunities can replace 100 operations by police officers in just behaviour change alone, and that's what we were trying to achieve. The one thing I was delighted about, if we were mentioned on GCN at the time, like I said, is sort of that was the thing that did it for me. And then we moved on. We went to the cycle show again, but instead of being outside, we're inside, being interviewed on the stage. That's us with Duncan from We Are Cycling UK, and you know, that's us with Chris, and it just went on and on. And because of the publicity, it became really good, because then when we had more third-party stuff going to court, when the trial was brought, the magistrates would sit there on the bench at the front, and instead of having to be explained what Operation Close Pass was, as soon as they mentioned Operation Close Pass, all the magistrates knew what Close Pass was, what was involved, and what we were trying to achieve, and what the actual offence we were looking at, that, you know, due care offence. And that's why the media was critical and worked so well. Right, the next stage, when it's all in place, so it was launched, it was working. We couldn't deal with the third-party stuff anymore because it was too much, so we handed it over to the Traffic Investigation Unit, West Midlands Police. The manager there, Stu Baker, we did a presentation for him and his staff, told them what we were doing, showed them parameters we worked to. and explain to them the main thing is demand. And again, we said we're not bothered about numbers as much as we'd like to put through as many as possible. We want just a steady stream of stuff that's going to go through. We're not going to lose at court because there's certainties that we can put out there and just change wholesale driver behaviour as a result once they know where it's going on. And they took it on. And now, you know, in the West Midlands, we do 3,000 offences a year through them, from all sorts of, you know, sort of camera opportunities, whether it's motorcyclists, cyclists, people on foot, actually. We get a lot of people filming stuff with mobile phones on foot as well now, especially around zebra crossings and things like that, you know, sort of pedestrian crossings. And from on buses after I did the bus thing, but that save that for another day. So once it's all on stage and when it's there and working well, and you've got to have the 3 different elements for Operation Close Pass to work and change behaviour. You've got to have the police officers out doing it, you've got to have the media approach right, and you've got to have the third party reporting. If you take away one element, it doesn't work. Once it's out there working, it basically then gave us opportunity to do other things, because we didn't have to do the operations all the time. We literally knocked it down. We're doing probably 1-2 Operation Close Passes ourselves a month. The one problem we had with close passes once it was up and established is we weren't getting the close passes on the operations anymore, not enough to justify, you know, just running an Operation Close Pass. And that's when we developed Operation Close Pass Plus, where as well as the bike cams, I started taking out helmet cam, and we started doing seat belts at the same time and phone offences and all sorts, just to give us that bit of added extra value. But what then we could do, it gave me time to go out on the bike on the infrastructure. And so we're looking, you know, when the Birmingham infrastructure was launched, I would go out on uniform, in uniform, sorry, and sometimes not in uniform on the Birmingham infrastructure, and what I'd call police the infrastructure. And literally I could use the infrastructure to ride up and down with the helmet cam on next to the road, get drivers on phones, but more importantly, I could start dealing with people who made the infrastructure unsafe for other people. So like parking on the routes, you know, sort of when I'm about and about, parking on zigzags. There's lots of different things I could do. And of course, people who didn't really get the infrastructure. So there's a taxi driver trying his best to knock me into the Bristol Road. And there's another one on the A34, again, the same sort of thing with another driver. And so I could go up and down, and for those, all those offences that you see there, I was in full uniform, so it's not like they couldn't see me. And you know, it gave us opportunity to, you know, build again an evidential base and send people to court for all the different things. And while we were about, we could also deal with people not, you know, other offences with other cycling infrastructure. And there's one on Severn Road as well. So I mean, that was close pass and third party reporting and how it came about. And now, you know, like I said, it's spread everywhere. Operation Close Pass happens in various forms all over the world. We had inquiries from countries, you know, Australia, Canada, all of Europe. Some people did it one stage further. The Spanish, bless them, had a helicopter on their mountain passes where they got lots of cyclists in monitoring the gaps and stuff. I don't think we could go to that sort of expense, but it worked, and it worked well. And now, sort of, you know, everybody really knows about close pass, and third party reporting has moved on to the next stage for Operation Snap. And it's where we exactly envisaged it being, you know, all over the country, with people submitting footage, with police forces doing, you know, the odd operation to reinforce it, and the media getting right. Which brings me on to what we've heard this week about the Exeter bike camera giveaway and why it's a good idea. And this goes back down to, again, if you've got a small budget and you want to change driver behaviour, the best way of doing it. So Exeter bike camera, and Bob said earlier, there may not be the best cameras, and there may not be, you know, massive amounts of numbers, but that doesn't matter, because if you put that in the local paper, the cyclists are being given cameras to report dangerous driving. Like I said earlier, it basically, you've got every cyclist then being a deterrent against what is the greatest threat of harm, which is offending driving. The people driving around Exeter won't know whether that cyclist has got a camera or not, but it will change their behaviour around that cyclist once they realise that the cameras are being given away, and you know, they're being used. The only thing I would say is that they need to follow it up with a couple of prosecutions from the cameras, and they only have to publicise a couple of them to reinforce the fact that they're being used. and all of a sudden you've got a great deterrent. And what I've always said is I can influence the behaviour of 95% of drivers. The other 5% you can't. And in those 5% are people like me who think they're the best driver in the world because of the training they've had and won't listen to anybody else. You've got the mentally ill who don't listen to anybody, and then you've got the genuine criminal element that won't change their behaviour no matter what. But the other 95% out there, once they get that idea in their head, that there's a good chance they're going to be caught if they do have an interaction around a cyclist that is in any way going to harm them, because they've potentially got a camera or potentially it's a police officer on a bike. It changes what they do massively, and that is why that extra bike camera giveaway with a small budget. I mean, let's face it, with £2,000, something like that now, you could buy at least 20 cheaper cameras if you like. That's all you need to do, and you'll get a very good result for that money. And so, you know, whoever's put up that money, whether it's, you know, the actual council, I don't know, but and knowing Exeter like I do, I used to spend a lot of time down there on holiday and done some cycling down there. The way that people drive down there, especially when you've got the rural roads and bits and pieces like that, it will work well and change behaviour. And like I always say, they may not like it, but you know, they have to put up with it, and they can say what they like, but it's out there and it will change the behaviour. And so that is a potted history of Operation Close Pass, how it came about, and third-party reporting and how that came about. And like I said, if you asked me 6 years ago what we would want to achieve when we started it all, I couldn't be more happy, really. And Steve's exactly the same. The way it's grown nationally and internationally, 6 years ago, we were struggling as vulnerable road users to get any sort of road justice. Everybody knows that. And now we're at a point where, you know, at least if you've got the footage or somebody else has got the footage and something happens, and, you know, you have that close pass or you have that person pull out in your junction, something can be done about it. And, you know, the effect on drivers is, you know, as you see, I mean, I love it now when I ride around or drive around. I see a cyclist on the road. I don't watch the cyclist, I watch the driver. I watch the car and see what they're going to do now. And that's what I'm fascinated with, the driver behaviour. And, you know, when I see that car pull, you know, wait for the gap, pull to the other side of the road and give the cyclist the whole road, I always think, well, you would never have seen that 6 years ago. And so it's getting out there, and the more that we do it, the better it will become. And that's it, really. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, that was absolutely brilliant, Mark. I'll just want to thank you for all the work you're doing, really. I'm sure everybody else would. We've completely run out of time for questions, but I'm sure Mark wouldn't mind you approaching him on Twitter and stuff. He's like that.
Yeah.
Now, so.
That's it. If anybody's got any questions, just stick them on my Twitter account and I'll answer them on Twitter. That's it. Yeah, so fantastic.
Magic. So yeah, we'll wrap it up there. I'll just ask Ruth to say a literal last word, and then we'll see you all next week for part 2 of the history of highways together. And I'm hoping, Mark, you can come back again, because we definitely could listen to you all night. And I get the feeling you could talk on that as well, and we'll give you a full session. That was absolutely fantastic work.
I can, there's lots of operations you can do on, but I can give you one that it'd be interesting for people to hear, that sort of, you know, one that is a brilliant operation, but we didn't get the media right on it, so it didn't work in the way that we wanted to. So, you know, it's a learning curve, and, you know, anybody who says they don't make mistakes in my job is lying, basically. So, you know, I think people to where we were gone wrong as well as right.
Well, keep up the good work and keep trying things out for sure, keeping us all safe there. I wanted to call you a hero, but I was thinking, well, he's doing what we all do, and we all go through that. But it's fantastic that you are bringing that to everybody's attention. So,
yeah, I'll just quickly say something about the risk assessment on Operation Close Pass, and saying what we all do is that the police are very risk averse. And when Steve was writing the risk assessment for Operation Close Pass, I said that he was a bit worried that they weren't going to let us do it. And I said that they can't say that. I said, because they could never let us know, because all we do is put a cyclist down the road doing whatever, you know, tens of thousands of people do every day, and that's cycle on the road. And I say, you know, if they did turn around and say that's too dangerous to do, I said, what more do you need to you know, to say something needs to be done? And so, you know, luckily the only thing we ever had was that they wouldn't let us do it in very heavy rain. Nothing to do with the cycling. It was just that in case the mat got slippy and somebody slipped over on it. Health and safety. There you go.
Excellent. Okay, well, we'll leave it there. Ruth, have you got a last word for us?
Yeah, I've got a last word very quickly. Building on last week about cycling with children. So I was a single mother, worked very long hours, and my poor child was dragged out on any time that I got to cycle. And he once cried on a very steep hill and said he was going to report me to the NSPCC. He's now 29 and he cycles on his Brompton to Oxford and Brighton and Cambridge. Last Saturday we went out, because that's the only way I can see him with the lockdown. We cycled to Greenwich to try out the new C4. I put out on Twitter, help, how do we find it? It was quite difficult to find. Eventually we got onto it and it is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, it was like as close to being in Holland as I've ever been. But often, so the downside is when it got to the roundabout by Rotherhithe Tunnel, the marking was very poor. And I think this is something very key for all professionals. Way marking on most cycle routes gives up at the point where you really need it. But I just want to plug cycling with your child, however old they are. It's the best thing ever.